The Varna Chalcolithic Necropolis was discovered in 1972 in the Varna Lake area and is dated to the middle and second half of the 5th millennium BC. It is believed that the findings from the so-called Varna Gold represents the oldest technologically processed gold in Europe and the world. Attributed to the so-called Varna culture, 4400–4100 BC. The archaeological site is one of the most remarkable and significant monuments of the prehistory of the Balkans and Europe. The site was discovered by chance when digging a canal in the western industrial zone of the city of Varna. The necropolis was studied by the Bulgarian archaeologist Ivan Ivanov for 15 years. Among the many graves, several stand out with an abundance of gold objects. It is believed that the necropolis testifies to the emergence of power structures and the earliest socially divided society in the Balkans, which arose nearly a millennium before the emergence of the Sumerian and Egyptian civilizations. Burials with gold finds are of two types. One contains human remains, skeleton, and the others are cenotaphs, symbolic burials. The skeletons are in an extended position, belonging mostly to male individuals, or in a haka pose, skeletons bent to one side, where the knees rest on the elbows, according to the amount of objects and decorations found. The graves can also be divided into three types, from extremely rich ones to those containing only a few small objects placed around the skeleton. The discovered gold objects are more than 3,000 in number, and the total weight exceeds 6 kilograms. A similar concentration of gold artifacts from the 5th millennium BC is not known elsewhere. Radiocarbon samples of the skeletons were analyzed in laboratories in Oxford, Mannheim and Poznan. When calibrating and interpreting them within broad limits, two different versions have been proposed. A team from the universities of Oxford and Durham, Great Britain 4600–4400 BC. A team from the universities of Tübingen and Kiel 4690–4330 BC. Both teams are unanimous in the narrow dating of the necropolis, from 4550 to 4350 BC. The Varna Chalcolithic Necropolis was discovered by chance in October 1972, when during construction work, the planned laying of an underground electric cable, Rycho Marinov, who was digging a trench with an excavator in the Zazalanata area, once in the land of the village of Vladislavovo, later a district of the city of Varna, noticed the presence of metal products and stone tools in the excavated soil. Subsequently, the collected artifacts were taken by him to his native village of Chengay, now Asparuhovo, where at that time archaeological excavations of a Neolithic settlement were taking place. There he handed him over to Dimitar Zalatarski and Ancho Anchevgrad, curators of the museum in the city of Dolgopol, with a protocol describing 27 gold objects, 6 copper knives and 3 flint plates. On October 30, the artifacts were handed over to research assistant Mikhail Lazarov and curator Alexander Minchev, who collected the finds for storage in the Varna Archaeological Museum. On November 2, Raicho Marinov showed the place where the objects were found to the museum employees, who organized the clearing of the already dug trench. It has been established that a Chalcolithic necropolis exists on this site. During the excavation work, the excavator destroyed a burial pit. Within a month, the initial archaeological survey was organized. The sieve was excavated with earth, and subsequently it was carefully washed. The finds were collected, and the walls and bottom of the canal were cleaned. Spots from 3 more burial pits were discovered and their study began, along with the expansion of the study area. At the end of December, the excavations were stopped. The area was fenced off to create suitable conditions for long-term fieldwork. The excavations were initially led by Mikhail Lazarov, whose deputy and de facto head was Ivan Ivanov. After winning a contest for a new associate in 1974, Ivanov officially became the head of the site's research. Excavations continued almost without interruption in 1972 to 1978, then in the 1980s with several interruptions. The last excavation season at the site was in 1991, after which the research was suspended due to lack of funds. During this period, 301 graves were investigated. Extremely precise written, graphic and photo documentation for the object was created. The total surveyed area is 6,500 cubic meters. It is estimated that about 30% of the site's territory has yet to be excavated. 1972 to 1975 year by the end of the archaeological season of 1975. An area of 150 square meters had been excavated and a total of 60 graves had been discovered. 5 of them are the so-called cenotaphs, symbolic graves, with the presence of gold rings, a flint gun and ceramic vessels, as well as a copper object. The remaining 55 were revealed with the presence of skeletons in them. They are divided into 2 types. Those in which the skeletons are laid on their backs in an extended position and those in which the skeletons are placed in a collapsed position on one side, in a squatting position. The inventory of the burials is diverse. Of scientific interest are 2 anthropomorphic sculptures placed on the chest of one of the skeletons. A vessel was also found which, after clearance, was recognized as a stand for another vessel of unusual shape and function. 1976. In this season, the studied area was 900 cubic meters. 21 new graves were discovered, which are divided into 3 main groups: cenotaphs, hawkers and with skeletons in the stretched position laid on their backs. The symbolic graves, cenotaphs, are 5 in number, and 3 of them have a poor inventory, and in 2, crushed human bones were found. Only 3 in number with parts of 9 human skeletons were found in the graves with extended skeletons. The hawkers are also no different from those found earlier. Only one of them is different. In it the skeleton is revealed lying to the right with the lower limbs strongly bent. laid almost to the chest. Among the finds representing the inventory of the graves, new objects were discovered: a variety of gold anthropomorphic plates, a copper needle with a double helix, 2 flat bone idols, found lying on the chests of the skeletons in a collapsed position. 1977 year. 50 more burials were discovered during this archaeological season. 3 of the graves are symbolic, 19 skeletons are supine, 11 are in the hawker pose, and 17 graves are badly damaged. For the first time, graves of children under the age of 6 have been discovered, with rich grave goods including gold ornaments. Of scientific interest is the found necklace with a gold anthropomorphic sculpture flanked by alternating red quartz, white mineral beads and gold spirals. A copper head of a spear with a rectangular cross-section of the body was also found. Research in 1977 proved that the necropolis occupied a large area, with 3 unique centers of different types of burials: hawkers, cenotaphs and skeletons in a stretched position. 1980 year. During this archaeological season, the survey was carried out on an area of 350 square meters. 26 new graves were discovered, bringing the number of unearthed burials to 179. 1 cenotaph was found with the presence of ritual bone crushing. 3 graves with skeletons in a stretched position on their backs, with copper, stone, spondylus and ceramic inventory. The hawkers are a total of 9 in number. 1 of the skeletons in the hawker graves was found in a closed position by the eyes. A total of 417 items were found in one of the graves. From this archaeological season, Ivan Ivanov assumes the role of head of the survey. 1981 year. 25 graves were studied, and in 12 of them the skeleton was found destroyed and it was impossible to determine its orientation. 8 of the burials are symbolic, and 5 of the burials are laid supine. The grave goods consist of copper, flint, bone and clay objects that repeat those already found in previous seasons. Also found were 10 gold objects and a new variety of anthropomorphic gold plates similar to a find of the same period found in Moigrad, Romania. 1982. It was found that the graves continued in the direction of the shore of the lake and that their saturation was greater than the average. A total of 11 burials were discovered. The inventory accompanying the burials is no different from that found in earlier seasons. Ivan Ivanov reports that the topography of the prehistoric terrain should certainly be followed in future studies. 1984 year. An area of 550 cubic meters was studied. The main aim of the survey is to establish the eastern and northeastern border of the necropolis. 38 graves were discovered. The northeastern side of the necropolis has been identified, which confirms the suspicion that the site is of considerable size. It was established that in this part of the necropolis the burials are at a depth of 0.70 cubic meters. It has been confirmed that the symbolic graves are on the periphery of the necropolis. Ivanov suggests that the necropolis is probably related to the settlements from Lake Varna. which are synchronous with the site and in which similar artifacts of horn, ceramics and bone were found. 1985. In this archaeological season, 450 cubic meters were studied, and 13 new graves were discovered. To the east, the necropolis reaches the former terrace of the lake and thus the eastern border of the site is established. The artifacts discovered are no different from those already found earlier at the site. Ceramic fragments, flint, copper artifacts and 4 gold fragments predominate. A survey is planned in the north and northwest direction. 1991. Excavations are concentrated in the easternmost part of the necropolis. 300 square meters have been studied. 13 new graves were discovered. This is the last archaeological season in the survey and the discovered burials reach 294. The burials cover the 3 already known types: hawker, cenotaph and supine burial. The total number of finds is 298. 4 gold artifacts were found, among them an anthropomorphic amulet, copper axes and awls, flint and stone tools, malachite beads and fragments of 47 ceramic vessels. No differences were found in the burial ritual or in the burial. Scientists perceive that the funeral rites in this archaic late Chalcolithic society that created the necropolis reflect the social, not the property, status of the deceased. It is assumed that social stratification arose as a result of the introduction of new aspects in socio-economic development, the appearance of mining and metallurgy and the related trade exchange. It is believed that at this stage of the development of Varna culture, the separation of crafts and trade from agriculture and animal husbandry, which created prerequisites for changing social structures and the concentration of power in the hands of a small group of people who were buried with more and richer grave goods. From this point of view, the Varna Chalcolithic Necropolis perhaps illustrates the first stages of the birth of class society, which turns it into a testimony of the appearance of the first prehistoric proto-civilization in Europe, and probably in the whole world. Gold objects were seen as a kind of attributes, testifying to the social status of their owners, and it is assumed that they had a rather sacral symbolic meaning, rather than a sign of well-being. In this regard, some scholars suggest that the Varna necropolis is a cult place in which chieftains of great importance for the territory of a large intertribal union are buried, which suggests the beginnings of a state unification. Another more likely interpretation is that the necropolis is a cemetery for the inhabitants of the socio-economic center of the highly developed community inhabiting the northwestern Black Sea coast in the second half of the 5th millennium BC. Leading experts in prehistory, such as Professor Colin Renfrew and Professor Maria Gimbutas, consider the finds from the site as a kind of civilizational peak in the development of the prehistoric Karanovo culture. Subsequently, in scientific publications, the site is related to the Varna culture, and it is often defined as pre-civilization and pre-state organization. The study of the copper finds from the necropolis show that 55.1% of the copper used for the production of the tools and weapons found in the graves was mined in the ore areas in the southern part of the Black Sea coast. 38.8% of the metal was mined from the eastern part of the Upper Thracian lowland Ibuna, etc. deposits, and only 6.1% comes from other sources. The data show that the western Black Sea sources of the metal are under the full control of the so-called Varna Metalworking Center. A characteristic feature of the male graves among burials from the necropolis is that they contain a large array of weapons, battle axes, spears, bows. It is the battle axe, the handle of which is covered with gold plates, that also becomes a scepter, a symbol of power. It is assumed that during the Chalcolithic gold had more symbolic than economic value. Social equality, which is judged by the similar architecture and inventory of the houses. However, the tangible difference in the way of burying the dead shows that the deceased have a different social status, which they retain in the afterlife. It is assumed that until then social differences were only based on ideology. Another opinion is held by Professor Douglas Bailey, according to whom the late Chalcolithic burials from Varna and Durankalashki necropolises do not reflect hierarchy or social structure. Bailey sees the laying of the bodies of the dead, offerings, and funerary rituals as important elements of props in creating imagined ideologies of power and social hierarchy where none existed or where the actual rules of everyday life were elusive. The archaeological site is located on a sloping slope with a southeast exposure on a non-flooded terrace at an altitude of 12.50 to 20 meters. The distance from the necropolis to the northern shore of Lake Varna today is about 600 meters. The intensive deposition of sediments, as well as the artificial embankment of significant earth masses along on the coast in this section, have significantly changed the natural landscape. The uppermost layer is humus with a black-gray color. In the intermediate layer, humus-rich soil, clay, sand and small limestone inclusions are mixed. The next layer is a neogene, unusually thin and shallow, due to the close location of the sea basin. Its different layers are due to inundations and retreats of seawater. The graves were discovered at different depths, as their location on the ground and the depth of excavation determines their finding in different geological layers. The slope of the terrace on which the necropolis lies has a slope of about 12 degrees from northwest to southeast. The graves in the entire southeast half reach and disturb the layer sand, with the easternmost of them excavated from the lowest part of the terrain and the southeastern half also crossing the sand and being excavated in the gravel layer. The graves in the northwest half are dug into the clay layer and do not reach the sand layer. The continuous agricultural work on the terrain and the clearing carried out in the 1950s and 1960s make it difficult to reconstruct the prehistoric relief. In the 5th millennium BC, the level of the Black Sea was significantly lower and, accordingly, the configuration of today's Lake Varna is completely different from the prehistoric one. The state in which most graves were found varies from undisturbed, partially disturbed to completely destroyed. For the most part, interventions of a different nature were found, as a result of which the skeleton and/or the inventory were destroyed to one degree or another, and most of them were duly documented in the field documentation. Initially, it was estimated that about 6% of the early burials are disturbed by later Chalcolithic graves, probably due to their lack of permanent and clearly distinguishable surface markers. Only 2 cases of such intervention are recorded, although 3 are described in the field documentation and in the compiled working catalogue of the necropolis. However, the available data, as well as the observations of Ivan Ivanov, reflected in the field diaries, give grounds for this number to be significantly increased. In most cases, overlapping graves remained under the same number in the diaries and work catalogue, even when the researcher had clearly distinguished them in the field. In some graves with mixed bones, during their laboratory processing, which was finally completed only after Ivanov's death, the presence of remains of more than one individual was found, which is also evidence of disturbance of one grave by another. Some of the graves lack human remains, but rich burial gifts are nevertheless present. These graves have been interpreted as symbolic burials. In grave number 36, over 850 gold objects were found: diadem, earrings, necklace, breastplate, bracelets, belt, gold hammer scepter, gold boomerang or sickle pattern, 2 gold plates representing animal figurines, 30 stylized horned animal heads, gold astragalus, ashik. The objects were covered with a gold woven covering, decorated at the edges with gold appliques in the form of rams or goats' horns. Tools are also laid out: an awl and a chisel. Precious objects symbolically outline the human body, signifying key places such as the head, neck, chest and waist. The clustering of more objects on the right side has been interpreted to denote this symbolic burial as male. The gold objects are interpreted as royal insignia, which is why this burial is considered a symbolic royal burial, especially since the objects from grave number 36 repeat the grave goods of grave number 43. Due to the presence of blacksmith's tools, the hypothesis of a symbolic burial of a priest-king, who was seen as a magician-smith, has been proposed. Similar symbolic royal burials were found in graves number 1, 4 and 5, which were located next to the symbolic burials of masks. Another type of symbolic burials are graves that contain clay masks of human faces, the elements of which are marked with gold: eyes, mouth, teeth, nose. Graves No. 2, 3 and 15. The faces are richly decorated with diadems, earrings, a necklace, and the whole face is covered with a gold-woven veil decorated with small gold beads. Clay vases, cups, needles are present as gifts in these burials, but the blacksmith's tools of the other type of burials are absent. The proximity of the symbolic burials of persons, graves No. 2, 3 and 15, to the symbolic royal burials, graves 1, 4 and 5, has been interpreted by some Bulgarian scholars as their participation in some common ritual and common religious belief, which significantly was later discussed in the scientific literature as hierogamy, a ritual enactment of a sacred marriage between the king and the mother goddess, or an actualization of a myth about the marriage between the first man and the first woman. It has also been suggested that these 6 symbolic graves are a kind of core of the Chalcolithic necropolis, and were probably laid at the beginning of its existence. This assumption is within the framework of a rather broad scientific interpretation, which has not been confirmed in any way. Among the graves in which skeletons were found stretched out on their backs, grave number 43 stands out. In it, the richness of the grave goods is exceptional. There is a stone and axe, interpreted as a scepter. Its handle is encased in gold, which leads scholars to assume that it concerns the burial of the leader of this highly developed community. Also, it is assumed that in addition to political, this leader also possessed religious power. Golden objects weighing more than 1.5 kilograms were placed with his body. The skeleton was revealed stretched out on its back, with the upper limbs bent at the elbow joints, with the bones of the wrists cleared in the area of the humerus. The 2 lower limbs are crossed at the ankles. The orientation of the burials is 24, measured along the spine line. According to the anthropological study, the skeleton belonged to a man, aged about 40 to 45 years. The burial pit is rectangular, with rounded corners, shaped a little wider in the northern part. The dimensions 2.70 by 1.05 meters, and the maximum depth 2.20 meters from the level of the modern terrain. Parts of a ceramic stand, as well as fragments of several ceramic vessels, were collected in the pit fill. Behind the left shoulder of the skeleton is revealed a group of 11 gold objects likened to pickaxes, some of which are exposed with the blades facing upwards. At the left shoulder are placed 1 copper and 1 flint spearhead pointing north. On the lower end of the copper spear, below the left humerus, a ceramic pan was found with 7 carnelian beads placed on it. 11 gold rings are revealed laid around the head, and below and around it are found large gold appliques with the polished part down. 2 ceramic vessels were cleared behind the skull, and another one was lying on the right, immediately next to the mouth of the burials, as the jaw fell on it during the decomposition of the corpse. On the right shoulder of the burials, with the blade towards the chest, is placed a copper axe, a hammer, and on top of it, a stone axe, a staff. The handle of the wand has a gold tip at its upper end, lined with 3 gold tubes, each of which is flanked by gold rings. 2 gold bracelets are placed on both arms of burials. On the left arm, beneath the pair of gold bracelets, is a spondylus shell bracelet that has been broken and mended, the places of the breaks covered with gold fittings. On the forearms, above the wrists of both hands, there was a string of gold rings. The body of the deceased was also laid with several strings of gold beads around the neck. 2 bone needles were found near the left arm. 2 golden rectangular plates were placed on the left side of the waist, and a flint scraper on the right. A lid and parts of a ceramic vessel were found next to the left elbow. Parts of another pottery vessel, a north-pointed flint plate and a copper awl were found next to the left thigh. A copper chisel, a copper awl, and a stone adze were found to the left of the knees. And between the knees themselves, a copper axe with a hole, a copper flat adze and a stone adze. On the hip lay a flint plate, and to the right of it, next to the upper part of the right thigh, a golden model of a phallus. 2 circular gold appliques were found between the thighs. A bow set with 6 gold band fittings. The smaller ones at the ends and the larger ones in the middle are placed on the left side of the body. In the area of its middle and lower part, traces of organic matter were found, on and in which a large round applique and successively alternating gold and carnelian biconical beads. Almost all over the body, but mostly in the chest area. Round gold convex appliques are found, some of which are grouped in the area of the feet. Some of the appliques were found with their convex side down. In separate sections between them lay biconical gold and carnelian beads. When lifting the skeleton between the bones, a flint trapezium, a microlith, was discovered between them. When washing the excavated soil, 26 beads of serpentinite and 19 of the shells of the mollusks Spondylus and Dentalium were found. The microscopic and metrical study of the bone material from the necropolis was conducted by Professor Yordan Yordanov from the Institute of Morphology and Anthropology at the BAS. The skull from grave 43 was studied, as it is the best preserved specimen from the site. The skull is European and can be referred to the Dinaric Nordic variant of the Dinaric racial type, which confirms the local origin of the burials. A total of 98 teeth from the permanent dentition of 5 skulls from the necropolis were also examined. The odontometric data are identical to the data for other European peoples and confirm that the dentition is as it is in modern man, with the largest size of the first molars. The study also found well-developed bony crestal elevations, a circumstance that testifies to a strong development of skeletal musculature. This fact makes it difficult to categorically determine the gender of some skeletons. Of particular scientific interest is the not particularly high height of the buried. The average height of female skeletons is 1.48 meters, and that of men is 1.61 meters. In 2012, after an act was issued for public state property, the management of the property was handed over to the Ministry of Culture. On October 28, 2015, the government of the Republic of Bulgaria granted the municipality of Varna the management of the property for a period of 10 years. In the same year, the municipality of Varna provided it for the management of the Regional Historical Museum, Varna. The Regional History Museum, Varna resumes the excavations of the Varna necropolis in 2021. Its southeastern part is being studied. From then until 2023, 26 more graves were discovered. The find emerges as the richest necropolis in Europe from the late Chalcolithic. The civilization that existed in this place was called Varna culture. The gold objects from the Varna treasure are the oldest processed gold in the entire world. The treasure is exhibited in the halls of the Archaeological Museum of the city of Varna.